All right. Hey there. First full interview chat for the new show for what is my show called? Local Newsletter Insider. So we're here with Landon Huslig, and he is out of Wichita, and his local newsletter is called Wichita Life. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, stoked to have you. We're both, we met. We're both in Michael. What's his last name? Kaufman. Michael
Awesome. Yep.
Kaufman's group, and he's awesome. Everybody should check him out. But excited to chat with you publicly because you're crushing it, and so would love to learn more about you and what you're doing. But I'm sure anybody listening would as well. So give a quick little intro about yourself and what you're doing with the newsletter there.
Yeah, for sure. Real high level. Grew up in the Wichita area. Grew up in the suburbs. My wife and I, high school sweethearts, both went to Wichita State. So if you remember, like the 2012 Final Four run, or
Yep,
yeah,
I remember.
2013 Final Four run. So we went down to Atlanta for that and everything. It was a blast.
Mhm.
Started working for Koch Industries. So if you've ever heard of the Koch brothers, I worked for them for almost 10 years up until about 2 weeks ago, and now
Oh,
I work for a nonprofit. So I'm no longer an
okay.
engineer, but working
Okay.
in the nonprofit space, which is awesome. Being able to kind of get in the community from that aspect. But along the way, as part of my engineering job, we moved away for about a year, came back, and then Wichita Life was born because a lot of my best friends from high school and college had moved away from Wichita to cooler cities because people like to say there's nothing cool to do in Wichita. And so kind of a opposite approach than a lot of people have taken. I was building an Instagram for years before I started a newsletter or even knew what a newsletter was. And so we grew. Our Instagram now has over 50,000 followers, but I didn't have a newsletter till about 3 or 4 years in. So we started the Instagram in 2017, started a podcast in 2018, all kind of under the Wichita Life umbrella. So there's Wichita Life social media, Wichita Life podcast, and then originally was the Wichita Weekly Update. And it was really just a way for me to shove my podcast link and try to get podcast downloads.
Mhm.
But I didn't want to just be spammy about it. And so I started doing like local news and events that are coming up. And then looking back, it was awful. I can send you the link to the first one. It was very bad. But with that, I kind of got into the Twitter sphere and learned about like, I didn't even know what Morning Brew was, fall of 2020, Morning Brew, The Hustle, started reading those, stumbled upon 6 a.m. City, which I'm sure we'll talk about, kind of local news, and they're doing it really big, large scale. But I kind of learned about them when they were only in like 7 cities. And I think before that, I've always wanted to do Wichita Life and like support it as like do that as a full time gig and just support our community and highlight cool things. But I didn't know what the product was. Like, I don't want to be an influencer. I don't want to just like be shilling stuff on social media. Podcasts are very hard to grow. I think depth wise, like we've mentioned it a little bit, but like My First Million, like they've got a huge audience now. And it's like, I feel like Sam and Sean are my friends. And so it's like very deep audience. But they're hard to grow and they're hard to monetize. And so with 3 kids, it's just difficult based on just that. And so when I learned about a newsletter, I'm like, oh, that's the product I need to do. I can grow that. You can monetize it. Everyone can, like, it's hard to talk to somebody and be like, hey, I want you to sponsor this podcast. It's like, okay, it's not super tangible, but sponsor newsletter is like just the newspaper. It's the modern day newspaper. And so it's been cool to kind of see how that's grown, and we can dive into details, but that's kind of a quick
Yeah.
rundown.
No, that's awesome. It's funny how you kind of came into this backwards for most of us. You kind
Yeah.
of stumbled into why is a newsletter valuable? First you're
Right.
doing it, and then yeah, that's really, but also the reason is because you were super early. You were doing this before
Right.
most people, and that's
Yeah.
that's awesome. I mean, most people know Ryan from Ryan Sneddon from Naptown. I think he started in 20 or 21. So
Yeah, so we
yeah.
started. He started in August of 2020, and so when I was kind of learning about it, and I got in the Twitter local newsletter Twitter
Mhm.
sphere with like 6 a.m. City and stuff. Ryan and I were talking a lot back then, and I have taken a lot of inspiration and gotten a lot of advice from Ryan. He's killing it.
Yeah, no, that's really great. I know a lot of us can, kind of found this concept from him because he was
Yeah,
very active doing podcast episodes and whatnot. But it's cool that you were there at that time.
yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so real quick on the newsletter, how many subs do you currently have?
We have like an exact amount. We just crossed 25,000 pretty
25.
recently. We are at I think like 25,500.
Wow. Okay. And how big
And
is
that's
Wichita?
and just for reference, it's probably like a 52% open rate. So I definitely have some list cleaning to do, but I've
Yeah.
created a segment just to
Yeah.
see like of the active people, what would that look like? And it would be like 21 or 22 with like a 62% open rate or something if I
Mhm.
clean it. But
Okay. Awesome. Um, How big is Wichita, or like the air, even Wichita Metro? Like,
Yeah, for sure.
how big is that?
Wichita proper is right around 400, 395, 400.
Okay.
And then like with all the suburbs, which again, I grew up in the suburbs, but
Mhm.
it's all Wichita. Like you go into
Yeah,
Wichita for everything.
doesn't matter.
It's probably like 650 ish,
Okay, man.
650,000.
That, to me, that seems like almost ideal, right? Where it's big enough that there's a huge market there, but it's small enough that people don't think about it. You're not going to get
Yeah,
insane competition,
for
So,
sure. Well,
uh,
it's nice because it's like we could ride in Stenton, for example, like he's killing it in Annapolis, but it's a much smaller, it's a
real
way
small,
different demographic. It's a lot smaller population wise, but they're also a lot wealthier.
but
Like
it's wealthy.
I'm in the Midwest. It's like I think we have the cheapest rent of like anywhere in the country and like the lowest home prices, which are still very inflated over the last few years, but like
Mhm.
one of the cheaper places.
Comparatively.
So
Yeah.
it's a little bit different demographic there. But then we're also small enough. So we're a lot bigger compared to some of those smaller areas, but we're a lot smaller than like Kansas City. Like 6 a.m. City doesn't care about Wichita. They moved
Mhm.
into Kansas City, and that's the
Yeah.
closest. Or like maybe
Mhm.
Omaha is probably just a hair small because we're a little smaller than Omaha, a little smaller than Oklahoma City. So like we don't really get the big competition. So it's
Mhm.
kind of nice. We're like a kind of a big fish in a medium pond right now.
Yeah, no, that is really good. So tell me how you think about what you're doing as far as you already mentioned a podcast, right? So you have a local podcast.
Yep.
Is that right? Yep.
Yes, sir.
And then are you doing really well? I think if I remember correctly, you're doing really well on Instagram or social media in general.
Yeah, so yeah, we're doing pretty well. So Instagram, which is I post Instagram first. That was always the first thing, and so like I post on like TikTok if we've got a video, or Facebook or Twitter. Altogether, we're probably right around 100,000, but we're right around like 51, 52,000 on Instagram.
Yeah, that's crazy. Okay. So would you say you consider yourself, this is something that I'm kind of trying to think through a lot and kind of almost promoting at this point, is thinking about this more as a local media company and less
Yeah,
just a newsletter?
yeah, I call it like a I probably vary my pitch every time I do something,
Yeah.
but it's like I call it like a hyper local media company or hyper local digital media since we don't really have any print
Okay.
or anything like that. Yeah, hyper
Yeah,
local
yeah.
digital media is what I've kind of settled on.
Okay. Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
And one thing that I know about you, which is crazy, just get this out there as we go into some more detail. How, so you're doing here, let's start here. How
Yeah.
many issues are you doing, or how many newsletters a week?
We do 4 a week right now.
4 a week. Okay. And how many people do you have helping you?
Not many. My wife helps me a little bit with the social media stuff, and then my mom helps me pull together some of the events. But that's about it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm writing every word in the actual newsletter. And
That's so
I guess just to
crazy.
clarify, we kind of have like 4 or 3 formats now across those days. So I know a lot of people are like doing once or twice a week, and they're doing a pretty similar, just kind of the I don't know, morning brew, 6 a.m. city like
Mhm.
event or like local news, kind of broken up into whatever that is,
Mhm.
business, local, civil, however you want to do that, events, maybe sports, maybe weather, something along those lines. And so we do something similar on Mondays and Fridays. On Wednesdays, and this is kind of how we stepped in. We originally said once a week and then twice a week, and we worked our way up to 4 times a week. When we first kind of went from 1 to 2, we did the same format. When we went from 2 to 3 was probably 2.5 years ago. I needed more ad slots. I had some bigger companies in town that were interested in advertising, but I didn't have any ad slots, and so I started writing a deep dive. And so it's really, I mean, I think I always shoot for under 1,500 words because I had some trouble on ConvertKit before. It would kind of trim it and the open rate would drop by 15%. But I would start writing these deep dives that are just on either like a historical event or a building in town. Like, what's the history of this building, different history stuff in town. There's an upcoming festival. Like, what is this new festival? How can you get involved, etc. And so that's on Wednesdays. And then Thursdays, again, I had some extra advertisers trying to fill some spots. But I wanted to have it kind of a low lift. And so that one, I guess when I typically cover events, it's normally like whatever, this concert at this venue at this time. And it hyperlinks out, but it's not real in depth. And so the
Mhm.
Thursday email is just a quick rundown of Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then events that are all weekend. And it just adds an extra line or two describing that event. And if there's like a price or ticket price, or if it's free, try to cover that. So it's a lot more skimmable. But that one is like, eventually I shouldn't have to touch that one at all. Cause like I throw in some sarcasm at certain events and stuff like that, but it's nothing that I would necessarily need to write. So
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, that's super impressive. I mean, you're definitely a inspiration on what I need to be doing. Because I love what you're talking about, is having kind of a structure per day.
yeah,
At least in general, I think that makes a lot of sense. Breaking things up and doing events on Thursday makes perfect sense. For the weekend, that's all really, Really
And
smart and really cool.
yeah, and it's nice. Like even like my Monday and Fridays, like I copy and paste a template. I use Notion to kind of keep track of everything. That was
Mhm.
another piece of advice back when I was first talking to Ryan in like January of 2021. Like using Notion, write everything in
Mhm.
Notion. Don't trust the whatever you. Neither one of us was using. I don't know if Beehive existed at the time.
Mhm.
Um, don't write it in the ESP because you never
Okay.
know if it gets deleted or whatever. So I
Right.
started using Notion a lot, but I copy a template and it's literally like intro, like main story, ad,
Mhm.
and I just go and I drop links in that throughout the week, and then the night before I go and write each story. I'm like, okay, whatever, it's already getting pretty full, let's move this link to the next one, or okay, this one I don't actually care about this, I don't need to write about this, I don't think anyone else is going to care if I don't care about it. So it's nice to have that structure. And then that Thursday email, the inspiration for that, just a couple other kind of newsletters for people to look at. One is from Boise, and so
Mhm.
Marissa, I don't know, she got married since I met her. Her last name used to be Lavelle, but she lives in Boise, Idaho, and she kind of started it with Nathan Barry, who is the
Yeah.
founder of ConvertKit. But
Mhm.
she goes twice a week, and one of them is kind of like a deep dive or historical event, and then the Thursday is events. So I kind of copied from that format.
Yep.
But then also I listened to it on the Creator Spotlight podcast.
Mhm.
They had Kate, I believe her name was, from London Cheapskate, and she's got a really good format as well. That's just like hers is all free and cheap events up in London. But
Mhm.
it's I just really like the format, like breaking it down, like have a couple suggestions per day. And I don't know, it's just like a very simple and clean format to cover events. Cause I think if I was going to start fresh in a different city and didn't have a lot of time or resources or whatever, I would just cover events. I wouldn't even try to cover
Mhm.
news off the bat. And I
Yeah.
think, which is something cool that we've seen in the newsletter club group, like everyone has it, that every single person is doing it somewhat differently, which is cool.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. No, that's super interesting. And then just real quick on the tech side. So you recently moved to Beehive, is that right?
I did. I used
Okay.
I used ConvertKit for 4.5 years, and then the first of this year I started using Beehive. So
Okay. Is there any quick like what was the thought behind that?
honestly, like I didn't have any issues with ConvertKit at all. I mean, no major issues. I think the when I probably could have gone like another layer further with like the templates and stuff, but like I just like how clean Beehive is.
Mhm.
And I think one of the biggest things is like the support. Like their ConvertKit was quick to help if something was wrong. Like you could go to the chat and like they'll help you out
Mhm.
fairly quickly. But like I remember I made a Twitter thread one time, which I don't tweet a whole lot, but it was like basically like 20, 30 suggestions of like ideas for them to do. And I never
Mhm.
got anything. The other day I posted something on Twitter about like Spotify has like monthly listeners. Like anytime I want to compare like how big a musician is, I go look at the monthly listeners. I tweeted
Mhm.
out this dumb idea. It was like maybe Spotify or maybe Beehive should have that for like monthly readers. So, like I know my open rate, I know my this, but I want to know like are 12,000 people reading per month or whatever that is. Like it's just another
Mhm.
way to look at it. Tyler Dank liked
Mhm.
it, like half their team liked it. I'm like, okay, see, at least I know they're seeing this. Like
Yeah.
ConvertKit's a big company, but like I don't think they're too big that they can't respond to some stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like a turn off, but it was like, okay, it's just a turn on for Beehive. So
Yeah. 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 No, totally. Yeah. They're, I wonder, is he truly running that account? Because I post things where I don't even tag them in it, and like he somehow finds it. I mean, I don't know, but
I think he
whatever he's
does.
doing, they're
I
doing
think
it
he
well.
does, but
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I guess this newsletter space, while they are already a huge, huge company, I guess it's kind of a small world, or at
yeah,
least those on Twitter, right?
yeah,
They
for
obviously
sure.
have tons of customers who are
I,
not
th-
on.
I think that's a big thing is like I feel like sometimes it's like okay, like people's call newsletters a bubble, or like there's certain
Mhm.
things, or like AI this, AI that, AI's overrated, whatever. It's like
Mhm.
the Twitter sphere is like such a bubble. It's so
It
funny.
is.
Like if I go talk to like I could look around my houses and I bet like I know my one of my neighbors randomly reads my newsletter, but like I bet half of these people have never even opened an email newsletter or used
Yep.
AI. But it's like everyone on Twitter
Mhm.
reads 20 newsletters and uses AI. So it's just fun. It's like we're definitely in a little bubble that I don't think people think about as much when we're on Twitter all the time.
Yeah, I 100% agree. 100%. Um, yeah. So no, that's all great information. So tell me when well, again, your story is interesting because you started with the Instagram. So
Yeah.
when you started the newsletter, were you starting from zero, or like how did you get it really off the ground and know that it was viable?
Yeah. So initially, so again, I started the Instagram in April of 2017 and I didn't
Mhm.
start my newsletter until June of 2020. And so we had monetized a little bit, like on Instagram, like people would pay us to do a giveaway or that kind of stuff. Or like we did have a couple like small sponsors, like a $50 sponsorship from the coffee shop for the podcast, that kind of thing. Cause we had a couple hundred listeners. Nothing crazy, but I had contacted via people sending me stuff or me reaching out, a couple hundred emails. And so I just grabbed all those emails that I had used over the last 3 years and sent my first newsletter out. And so I think it went out to probably like 150 people maybe. And so I had somewhat of a base. It wasn't zero, but it wasn't big. And honestly, early on, if something I recommend to people, and now seeing like, I didn't start Facebook ads for 6 months or a year, and Ryan kind of helped me set those up. But if I was starting from scratch and I had somewhat of an audience, I know those people that are following me care about the content that I have. What I did, since I did have an audience, I would go through on Twitter, Instagram, and mainly those two, and I DM'd like 50 people a day. And it was just like, hey, I send this newsletter. Would you be interested? If so, I wouldn't even like put a link for them to go sign up. I'd say, what's your email? And I went and put it in. And it's like, okay, they're already following you. So it's a very hot lead if they like your stuff. And then I'm DMing them and it's like, okay, I've got tens of thousands of followers. Somebody's probably going to read that DM. They're probably going to respond. And most of them said yes. So it's like, even if it's 50%, you're getting 25 subs a day for no cost. It takes 15 minutes to go DM a bunch of people. And I would literally just go through the follower list and just DM each person. And then it's funny, like if they follow you on both, they're like, hey, you already messaged me on Instagram. Like, like, or I already read it. And that's the best one. I'm like, well, thank you for reading. And so I've grown thousands of subscribers by doing that.
Yeah. That's super smart. I mean, that's awesome and super smart. Although, most people probably won't have that when they're starting, right? So you kind of.
But even that, it's like, I mean, as you grow, you could still just DM people. Like we have several local bloggers or whatever in Wichita that's not me. Just go message these people and say, it'll be a little different. It's not, hey, you follow me. It's, hey, I see you like Wichita content. You might like my newsletter. If you're interested, it's free. Like you can unsubscribe, but like, would you be interested? And they might say no, might ignore you, but you might get some free subs out of it. So
yeah, no,
I call it like hand-to-hand combat, but it's like people always say to like do the unscalable early on. And I think that's like the easiest way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Cool. And then, so that got you probably at least a couple thousand. And then what'd you do after that? When did you start doing Facebook ads? Assuming you did.
So I started doing them probably beginning of 2021, but it was like, one, I had no idea what I was doing until Ryan showed me a little bit of what he was doing. But it was like, I don't know, I wasn't getting them for like 18 cents like Michael Kaufman was. I was getting them for like, I don't remember. For the longest time, I just did the like lead gen form on Facebook. Because in my head, it was like, okay, if you send them to your landing page, you're going to lose just the friction of having to go to a different site. You're going to lose some percentage of those. But as we've seen, and after taking like Philip's masterclass in the newsletter club, which just a good reason to go sign up for this club is like just the masterclass from different people that have these experiences. I mean, now I'm getting them under $1, but I was getting them for probably around $1 up to like $1.50 sometimes.
Wow.
But it was, I don't know if I've ever gotten them for like a quarter, but it's been really good lately. But it was like $10 a day, maybe. Like I was $5. And it was not much at all, especially in the early days. And it would be like, I never like ran out of money, but I would definitely like kind of pull back the throttle a little bit for whatever, if I had other costs come up or whatever. Or I mean, I wasn't making very much or any money for the longest time. So it's like, this is like even $10 a day. So it's $300 a month. That's a lot for somebody starting out. And so it's like, how do I justify that? And then as you grow, you can kind of just pump more in, and it's crazy to see how fast some people have grown.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's the guy in the group, I can't remember his name, but who got to 10 or 12,000 in a month. But I mean, again, I think that's what makes this model so appealing, is that you can do that if you're willing to put the money in. So I think in his case, he was at about $1 subscribers. Like, hey, if you got 10 grand to throw in it, you can get 10,000 subscribers.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, so yeah, no, that's super interesting. So tell me, let's get into where I think most people are, including myself, super, super interested, which is monetization, right? So, again, feel free to give as much information or as little as you want on specifics, but obviously you're monetizing it. Again, I don't know how much, but you're making legit money. I mean, how would you describe financially how it's going?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely like kind of stepped up. Like I wouldn't say a hockey stick, that'd be nice, but I mean, if we started in 2017, like we probably made $50 off of Instagram that first year. Like some
Mhm.
salon wanted to pay us $50 for a giveaway or whatever, and so it's kind of grown a lot over the years. But last year was definitely the biggest year. We went from, I don't know what we made the year before. Last year we crossed six figures total
Okay, so you're
revenue. So that's top line, which we hosted an event or two. So there's like that kind of stuff, which we don't really make much money on that, but there is that. But I would say 90% of it is probably like sponsorships. And most of the time, it's kind of hard to delineate whether that's just newsletter or social media. I try to keep track of that, but a lot of it's like package deals. So like we work with some local
Mhm.
businesses that want two of our primary ad in the email and then one post on our social media, because it's kind of hard. Like they kind of connect to the email and the value of the email, and they're seeing the results on their end, but like the Instagram is the shiny, like, oh, we're featured on the $50,000 or 50,000 follower uh Instagram account, right? So there's like people always want that piece too, and so I try to pull back a little bit on that, but there's always that. But yeah, so we crossed six figures. I'd say 90% of that was sponsorship or ad revenue. um Portion of it was we have a job board. And so I would say that hasn't taken off quite as much as I would think. But we've made money. Like we didn't lose money. And we use Niceboard, which is like the easiest possible tool. Like it was literally set up within 10 minutes. And people can post a job. I think it's like you set whatever prices you want, but like I would do it for like you could post it to the job board for $99, or you can post it to the job board and get featured on like our Instagram story and in the newsletter for $199 a month or whatever the numbers are. So I would like it to figure out a way, because a lot of times like I'll post it in the newsletter or whatever to feature it, and then somebody will see that and want to post their job. Or like on LinkedIn, I'll go search like Wichita hiring and just message those people, be like, hey, if you need any help hiring, here's a job board that's hyper local, and it will get featured on 100,000 follower social media plus this newsletter. So trying to figure out some ways to kind of automate some of that stuff. But there's those. We had a couple events. We host like an annual like anniversary or birthday party every year. So that's coming up this April. And we don't make a lot of money off of that, but I think we've kind of worked our way up to like the $40 or $50 per ticket um,
Wow.
arena. And so part of that is we provide like food, like it's full meal, like you can eat your full meal there, whatever. Usually have like unlimited drinks. So we work with like a local tequila company. They provide cocktails. We have beer, that kind of stuff, and we usually move it from like venue to venue. So like if there's a cool new, like last year was a cool new co-working space. The year before that, there's an insurance company that has like a sweet rooftop downtown. So we kind of move it from place to place each year. So some event revenue. Trying to think. We've done like a little bit of merch, like we've got some hats and stuff. We don't. That's more for fun and like brand building than anything
Mhm.
else. Or the Miami Vice themed Wichita Life shirt.
That's,
Um,
that's awesome.
but yeah, so I mean, the by far, I think the biggest chunk is sponsorship revenue. But I would definitely like Michael's got me always thinking about like the Monopoly board type stuff now,
Mhm.
like or products. But I also don't want to have to wait to get something from China. So it's like,
Yeah.
is there somebody like in the Midwest that manufactures? But yeah,
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. You're doing a lot of interesting things here, which is great. I mean, the first thing that jumps out at me, which is what I've already learned from you and some of the other guys in the club, is that I didn't know when I started is businesses really like the concept of Instagram or social media in general, but probably specifically Instagram.
yeah,
And I've heard this is the reason, and tell me if you agree, that the Instagram follower number is public, where how many subscribers you have is private. And so,
yeah,
while in theory we could tell them how many we have and show them our Beehive account,
yeah.
it still just doesn't have that prestige of like, oh, you have that many followers. So, even though an ad, in my opinion, probably is way worse on an Instagram page than a newsletter, it feels better for them. And if you're trying
Oh,
to sell them, you want to sell them what feels good to them,
oh,
right? Is that
absolutely. Yeah,
what do you think?
absolutely. And I think the way I try to like, we usually end up using some sort of Instagram agreement, but the way I kind of steer them back to the email is like on Instagram, I can't even link to your page. I can link to your Instagram page, but I can't link to your website. Like I can't
Mm-hmm.
even link directly to your offer. But in an email, like people are already reading. In Instagram, they might just be flicking through and they're not going to read the caption that actually is explaining the offer. But in the email, they're already reading. So if I can capture them with the copy and make it somewhat
Mm-hmm.
interesting, then they can actually do that and hopefully drive them to the landing page or the promo or the offer or whatever the goal is for that campaign.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's awesome. But that's why, it's funny because I'm calling this channel local newsletter insider, and it's like really I'd like to call it local media
Yeah.
insider, but you know, people are talking about this like newsletters because
Oh, for sure.
what you just confirmed is having other things happening, especially social media, Instagram, is what businesses want. If your goal is to sell advertising, that's what you need to do
Yeah.
as you know as best as you can. Now it's not easy. I mean, did you grow your well, again, you started a long time ago, but did you do any like tricks or growth hacks on your Instagram, or was it just like
Nothing crazy. Like, I mean, we followed a lot of people early on. So it's just like
okay?
following local artists, like photographers, artists, musicians, businesses, stuff like that. And a lot of them followed back, which kind of got
Mm,
the wheels turning.
okay.
But nothing crazy. It was just, I think the thing then was like 2017. There's a buddy of mine. He's been going for 14 years. And so he's got like 75,000 on Facebook, etc. He's crushing it. Wichita by EB. And we collaborate on a ton of stuff, which is fun. Like he's bigger on Facebook, I'm bigger on Instagram, and we just collab on everything. But besides him, like there really wasn't any accounts back then. Like he was on Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
but there really wasn't anything to compete with, really. And so
Mm-hmm.
now it's like there's 25 Wichita foodies, which are awesome. Like it's a community. Like we all support each other, but like it is harder to grow because of that a little bit. So
Mm, interesting. Okay. Um, so when you got helping the people like myself, just getting started on the monetization, um, how much how did you start with your first, you know, couple ads or businesses that paid you, right? Like what were you kind of offering and, you know, how did you present it to be able to close that?
yeah. I think early on, I really tried to play on like the CPM type stuff. So it was like, okay, whatever, I can get you 1,000 impressions for this much, whatever that number came out to be, which was not a lot. Like we didn't have a ton of subscribers, so it wasn't a big number. But I've kind of gone away from that. I think really it's like, okay, what are they willing to pay? And some people are like very sophisticated about it, and like they'll be like, okay, well, what is a lead worth to you? And like some
Mhm.
people will have those conversations, but a lot of people are just like, well, how much is it going to cost? And I say $700 for this deal or this package, and they either push back or they accept. It's really
Mhm.
not rocket science. It's
You
like,
just
what are people willing to pay? And it's like, is somebody going to pay $5,000 for one ad when a lot of people read it? 12 or 13,000 people will read that for one issue, but like $5,000 is way too high. Okay, so is
Mhm.
$500 more appropriate? And so like
Mhm.
you kind of got to see like it also depends on the business. Like we work with a plastic surgery place in town. Like they're high ticket. So
Mhm.
it's like versus like the local coffee shop who's selling $4 coffees. Like you got to sell a lot more coffee than you do to perform one surgery. So it's like you just kind of got to keep in mind who you're working with. But early on, I mean, I'm mostly open to working with anybody as long as like it doesn't fit. If it doesn't fit morally, I'm not going to work with. Like we've had to turn down some people. I'm just like that just does not make sense for
Yeah.
us to do. Like a bail bondsman. Like
Yeah.
go for it. I'm not nothing against your business, but I'm not going to promote your business. But then
Mhm.
on the flip side, we promote a CBD company in town because one of my good friends from high school runs it. I know they're legit, and I know the help people like my dog or my grandpa. So it's like some people might not promote a CBD company, but like I know
Mhm.
that there are good people behind that, and so it just kind of depends on. I don't know. I would just pick a number and start. Like if you think $100 is good, that's probably a good number to start with. Because like I don't
Mhm.
know, you could do if you're real small, you could be like pitch your ad for $10. Like okay, it also kind of shows the people like okay, if it's only $10, is it any good?
That's all right. Yeah.
Or I think
Yeah.
some interesting stuff too is like I know like clicks and open rate can be kind of sketchy sometimes. Like with Apple, some of the changes,
Mhm.
privacy and stuff. But you could also do like, hey, I'll run this ad until it gets X amount of impressions or X amount of clicks or whatever that is. So
Mhm.
that's
That's
another way you
interesting.
can do it.
That is,
But I mean, I
yeah.
think you just set a number and go for it.
Yeah, totally. Do you do, or did you then, or do you now do more, look for longer term sponsors? Like I know a lot of people in the group are talking about, you know, having an annual sponsor. Actually, it was the guy who sold his in Charlotte for $5 million that he talked
Ted,
about.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like I went and found 8 sponsors. I can't remember the number, something like 10 grand for the year. So I was like,
Yeah.
I just went and found 8 people for 10 grand. You know, the way he tells it on the podcast, unfortunately, makes it sound pretty easy, which we know it's not, right? But like, you got 8 people or 8 businesses that were willing to pay 10 grand for an annual partnership because they saw the future. And then I'm done. I only have to sell 8 times, and then that's the last thing I worry about ads for a year. How do you think about that? And do you do that, or what insights do you have on that idea?
Yeah. So I mean, that would be ideal. 100%. Like selling sucks, especially like my new job is a little bit more flexible during the day. But as an engineer, like I couldn't go out. Like I could go out over lunch maybe, but then like after work, I've got 3 young kids. I want to go outside and play with my kids. I don't want to go try to sell somebody at a meeting. And so selling was very difficult. Like I was just cold outreach, or like a lot of it was inbound. A lot of it's just, okay, I drive down the street, I see 20 billboards driving to downtown Wichita. I can make note of those businesses and I'll reach out and see. And sometimes it takes 5 emails or multiple phone calls. But again, it's kind of hard to sell that way. If you get somebody in person, then you can really explain your vision and stuff. And I think that's where you can get those long-term partners. And like we have probably 5 or 6 long-term partners, and we have room for more. But a lot of those other spots now get filled up with like, trying to think, like a local wildlife park we worked with, or like the airport, like they have a campaign going on. They want to do 3 months or 6 weeks, and it's like, okay, am I going to go turn down $3,000 because is this like, well, no, but it's like, would I want them to go the whole year? Yes, but like that's not presenting itself right now. So I'm just going to have to kind of keep this grind going until I get to that point, which is, I think it's just hard. There's only so many places that are willing to pony up that much money, right? Like we've tried to like somebody you would think would, but seems to me has been notoriously cheaper, like car dealerships. Like they do not want to pay. I'm like, you do realize like if I sell you 1 or 2 cars, like it's going to pay for most of this deal, and they just don't see it. But it's like I work with like another like orthopedic place where they do surgeries, physical therapy, and stuff. Theirs is so easy. They don't even ask for analytics. I provide analytics, but they don't even care. It's just like awareness, and they want to get more people in the door. So it's like if you can find who are those people in your town, that's the moneymaker.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. Is, just because something's ideal doesn't mean you ignore everything else. I know I've seen Michael talk about. Again, he does the same thing. He strives for annual deals or at least longer term deals. But hey, if somebody messages you, actually, Michael, he doesn't do a ton of ads. Maybe it was Jazz from Winnipeg. Who does really good.
Yep.
But it's like, okay, strive for the annual, or you still offer a semi-annual, maybe even a quarterly. Like you said, that's totally fine. But you don't want to chase the brands or the dry cleaner for one ad for $200, right? Because the amount of work.
I would definitely avoid that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I try to we do one-offs, but yeah, even 6 weeks is better than one-off.
Of course, but I think the point is like, don't chase those kind if if that's what they're asking for or whatnot. But if somebody were to like email you, if you get inbound and it's a reasonable type of brand that you're willing to promote, they say, hey, I'll give you $200 for one ad. You take it because you're not having to do any chasing, but you don't want to do any chasing.
Especially early on. Like you can go if you're getting subs for 50 cents, get a couple hundred more subscribers with that money. And like, I definitely turn people down along the road, but I've taken a lot of small deals throughout the growing the newsletter and everything else. So
yeah, I know.
I do not look down on it. Yeah, I take those deals. Yeah,
I think it's exactly. I think that's the point, right? Is don't look down on it, but don't chase it because that effort is not worth the payoff that you have to put in to chase it. But if it comes to you or it's super simple to just do, then just do it and take that little money, to your point, and use it to grow.
I think there's something to what a lot of people in the newsletter club talk about too, is just like doing some for free until you can, especially early on, because it does make you seem bigger. Like if you're only at 2,000 or 3,000 subscribers, that's not nothing. It takes a lot to get to 3,000 subscribers. Throw an ad on there, say sponsored by Together with so-and-so, and people are like, oh, dang, like how big are they? Like, that's awesome. Let me reach out and see what's going on, because any type of sponsorship, you're running a business, and that's awesome. That's not easy. So
yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that's a no-brainer, is running ads for, again, find your friends or somebody you're connected with or somebody you think would be a good advertiser.
Yeah.
Or the other option, of course, is put an ad in that says, hey, want to advertise to 3,000 local people in Lake City. You can do that one as well.
I still do that periodically. I'll still put in, it's like, instead of Together with whatever Morning Brew or whatever this is, it says Together with you. And then I say, do you want to get your business in front of thousands and thousands and thousands of people? Just reply to this. And last time I did that, I had 25 emails, and it was too much to get. It took forever to get through all those, but
jeez. No, that's awesome. And then what about feedback? So like from, I think actually I'd love to know how you're getting feedback, what kind of responses you get, how you hear from readers, to know like what is it that they're wanting? Like how do you know that you're doing a good job, right? I mean, obviously we can look at open rates,
Yeah.
but like you said, that how accurate is that pro or to the high side or the low side? Otherwise, how do you know what people want and that you're providing that essentially?
Yeah. I would say every email has a feedback form. So most of the time I use Google Forms, but I found like Uform is a really good alternative to like the paid type form stuff. Um, and so with that, it's just like, what did you think of this? And so there might be at the bottom, you can do like the whatever, good, like the thumbs up, the okay, whatever, meh.
Mm-hmm.
But really, it's the written feedback. And so that's always been really good. People just reply. I always encourage people to reply. I'll ask for feedback, like in the intro sometimes, be like, hey, how are we doing? What do you like? What do you dislike? Do you care if I chop this section? Like we used to have a weather section. Nobody cared. So I cut the weather section because it saves me 3 minutes of send.
Mm-hmm.
I know some people care about that, but like Wichita just doesn't care about it apparently. When it's already out of date by the time I send it, I wrote the night before, so you can just go look at
Mm-hmm.
your app. I'd say, yeah, just a lot of replies. I encourage people to reply, and then they just will, yeah, reply to the email, and we'll kind of start a conversation. It'll be a back and forth. On Beehive, I didn't realize this till the other day, but like I do polls quite a bit now that I'm on Beehive, but I didn't realize like once you kind of dive into the polls and the interactions or whatever, people are commenting on the
Mm-hmm.
poll. And so like the other day I was looking at one and like it had, I don't get this on all of them, but like there was like 700 replies to this poll. And I'm
Oh
over
wow.
there scrolling and there's like 20 mess. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is just all this feedback that I didn't even know was here. And so, yeah, I would just always encourage the feedback, but there's so many different ways. And the biggest ones early on, again, I was an engineer as of a week ago, engineer by trade, not the greatest at grammar or spelling. I got a lot of replies that were like, "Hey, check your typos," blah blah blah. I got a lot of replies about, "Hey, you spelled this wrong," and like some of these people have been reading for years now, and they still will point it out, and that's like a joke, and it's just kind of a inside joke between reader and writer because I've met a lot of readers, but I haven't met all of them, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's fun to do that, and then it is fun to meet people in public that read it. Like we moved out back to the suburbs last year, and when we were trick or treating, taking my kids around, one of the ladies, I kind of know her through people, but she's like, "Hey, I loved your email this morning." I was just like, "Oh wow, I didn't know you read it." Or like at a coffee shop the other day, they're like, "Hey, do you run one of those Wichita Instagram accounts and the newsletter?" She's like, "We read the newsletter," and I was like, "That is so cool!" Like to be able to
Mm-hmm.
make that connection. Like, then I can ask her name and like get to know the people that are actually reading it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. We actually just got the question. Curious if you're even using this yet. Um, Somebody said, "Oh, we love your newsletter, but it would be awesome if you had an app so that like I could just sit down and casually read it when I'm ready on an app and don't have to look for my email." And in Beehive, like it's built in, so like literally responded to
Have
her
you not
like,
used it at all? Have you
"Yeah,
used it?
yeah, this happened like 2 days ago." So I downloaded it, and it's a PWA, which means PWA is where it's like it's not in the app store,
Right,
so
right, right.
it turns your website into like a perfectly mobile
That's
optimized
cool. Yeah, I need
site.
to look at that. I need to look into that. I've
Yeah.
never done that.
Well, here's the craziest part. When I knew Beehive had this, I don't know, I didn't think about it because nobody asked, and finally someone did.
Right.
It's literally a setting in Beehive. There's just a button that says, "Do you want yours to be an app?" And you just click yes. That's it. It's
I
crazy.
need to look at that. That's super
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. So anyway, that was fun hearing somebody say that.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. So a couple other quick questions for you,
Yeah.
or general questions. What what would you say has been your biggest mistake or miscalculation? Something that you kind of had hopes for or excited about, maybe that didn't work.
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, probably just like I've been consistent writing it, but I've been so inconsistent with like the growth and the monetization. Like it's been better like the last couple of years, but like if I was growing like I am now since the beginning, which again, I didn't have the kind of income to support
Mhm.
that, but had I been rolling it into it more from the beginning, I mean, we'd be at 50,000 subscribers by now. So I think it's like being consistent with the growth aspect of it, which again, some of that's a knowledge gap. So it's like I wasn't using Facebook ads as optimized as I could. But then I think monetization, something I've now seen a trend over the last couple of years, a personal trend that's like monetization is going pretty well through the middle towards the end of the year. And then like a sponsor might kind of end at the end of the year, which is fine. Like that happens, like they're cutting budget or whatever else for the next year. But when it's going well, I don't do any cold outreach or
Yeah.
anything like that. And I
Mhm.
think the biggest thing I've seen is like, especially the big deals, like it's continuing to follow up. It's not being annoying, but it's like, okay, I haven't heard from them in a month. I'm going to text them, email them, call them, whatever that looks like. Be like, hey, just a reminder, like, hey, do we want to see if this wants to go anywhere? And like, I would maybe stop the follow up or just not reaching out to, like, again, when I drive down, I'm seeing people that are paying for TV commercials. I'm driving down to see people that are paying for billboards. I'm like, okay, this plumbing company just paid for 15 billboards. Like, they're clearly willing to advertise. I can give them a better way to advertise. I need to get in front of them. But it's like I kind of slow that outreach. And I think if you're consistent, you can kind of level out those like peaks and troughs and just be consistent throughout the year. Because I think one of the biggest things, like this just came to mind, but it's like I was talking to a bank a couple years ago, and so I was holding spots because they kept kind of leading me on that this was going to go through, and then it didn't go through 3 months later. And so one, I was wasting time because I wasn't reaching out to people because I thought this was locked in, and two, like I was saving them spots, which was dumb because they hadn't given me any money yet. But like in my head, it was like I have the eggs in my basket already, and they just never hatched. And so it's like you just have to kind of keep it going because keep the pipeline full. I think is the advice. Like keep the pipeline full. And again, I don't have a sales background. This is probably super obvious to some people, but it's not counting those eggs before they hatch because they might never come through.
So I would say a lot of people probably don't know that, so that's good advice. But I will also tell you, there's probably a lot of people like me who do know it and still don't follow it, right?
Right.
So it's a good reminder of, yeah, you cannot just feel like everything's good because I got a bunch of subscribers and take your foot off the gas,
Yeah.
because then you're going to be screwed. You got to keep your pipeline full and always be working it. So
Yeah.
that's either way, it's good advice whether
I
you know it or
guess
not.
secondary point too, I would say, is like getting more people involved or outsourcing. I'm still terrible at this, but I think I've heard a lot of people like they use VAs and stuff like that. I tried a VA once and it just didn't go very well, and it's probably my fault. I thought I had like a detailed kind of list of what I want them to do, and it's just like she was from Colombia, and there might have been some language barrier there or something. But just like outsourcing everything. And like I'm working on some like SOPs right now, like standard operating procedures, so I can like hand that off to like hire somebody for social media, hire somebody for my events calendar, hire somebody for this or that. That way I can take some off my plate now that we can kind of afford to bring some people on. And from what I've heard, VAs are super affordable. So it's just figuring out how to actually leverage those successfully.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have a lot of thoughts on that because I feel like you and I are almost literally the opposite, right? Which is you have the success and the need and the money, essentially. You're making six figures with this newsletter and not using a VA, doing everything yourself. I'm not making any money yet, but I do have technically two VAs, one full time, one part time. And so the reality is it should be flipped, obviously, right? So like
Yeah.
it for somebody, look, I sold my business last year. I still have, a little bit of extra money that I can
Yeah.
use to grow this thing. But for everybody else, if you're just in a normal situation, you should be doing everything yourself at the beginning and you should use the profits
Yep.
from advertisers to then hire VA. So
Oh, yeah.
like,
Sure.
yeah. So in your case, definitely you're making enough profit. I think you should
I
hire
need to
VA.
get
But I
some
think
advice from you then how to better leverage the how to where's the best place to hire them and
yeah,
then how to leverage
yeah.
them effectively. So
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely talk about that. I mean, the I'm trying to. The two main places are Upwork that most people probably know, and then there's onlinejobs.ph, which is like a Philippines-based
Philippines,
job
yeah.
board. I think that the quick hit advice for everybody is you just got to interview a lot of them. I
Yeah.
mean, you're going to interview like 9 out of 10 people you interview anywhere like are going to be horrendously bad, and that's just is what it is. So when you think of those recruiting firms that charge $3,000 or they charge an extra $1,000 a month or whatever, all they're doing is they're doing the work of dealing with the 9 that are terrible for all the good candidates, and
Right.
they're putting in that effort for you. That's basically what you're getting when you go to
Right.
those places. So if you're cheap or like I am, I don't use those. I just interview 10 people and 9 are terrible, and then you find the one good one. So
Yeah. How long have you had the two that you have?
um
Did you have them for the last
six
company or is
to
that
eight
also the newsletter?
uh from before the newsletter.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. So probably 8 months. So yeah, the
Cool,
guy,
cool.
I call him my assistant, Eric. He's from the Philippines and he's very well-rounded person. Like kind of like me actually, but like he's not really good at anything, but he's capable of figuring out almost
Right.
anything, which
Right.
is
Right.
great because especially in this business, like, oh, can you figure out Facebook ads? Can you figure out Meta Business Suite? Can you figure out Beehive? Can you
Right.
figure out Notion? Like most virtual assistants, like they might be really good at one of those, and maybe
Right.
they can finagle their way around two, but they're not going to be able to do all those things. So
Right.
in a way, he is kind of special because he's able to figure out all those.
Yeah, that
But
makes
yeah, I
sense.
would definitely urge you, and you don't even need to find something like that. You, in your case, you're writing so much, you could just look for somebody who's a good writer researcher, right?
Right, for sure.
And then
Yeah,
you just become an editor.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, cool. So last key topic here that kind of came up for me because I went to the newsletter conference last week,
Yeah.
and just we talked about it a little bit, but thinking through competition, whether from actually somebody like us, an entrepreneur, just potentially just doing what you're doing in your same town. I don't know if you have that, you can speak to that, but then also competition from there's the AI newsletter thing that's kind of already technically happening, but I think a lot of people are concerned that could become a really big thing. And then the other potential, we already talked about a little bit, but 6 a.m. City, or if anybody kind of creates organizations like that, that have big dollars. I don't know, all just competition, I guess, in general, or the future competition, not today, but in the future, and
Sure.
protecting this business and business model. So how do you think about that?
For sure. Um, I mean, I think the thing that makes Wichita Live or the Wichita Live update special is, or at least this is what my wife tells me. Maybe she's just making me feel good. Is like it has my voice. Like I'm joking around throughout it. Like I'm putting my sarcasm in it, being kind of self critical. So I think nobody can be you. So I think that's an important piece to keep in mind. But like we have some competitions. Like speaking of AI ones, there was it's called Daily Wichita, but somebody sent it in that group, but it's this guy, and I think he has like 50 or 100 different cities he
Yeah,
does.
the AI ones. Yeah, he has
Yeah,
like 350 or something.
350. Yeah, it's insane. So, anyways, I responded to that guy because somebody sent me this. They sent me a screenshot. They're like, "Hey, have you seen this?" And I'm like, "No, I haven't. I'm going to reach out to him because at the bottom it has his name. His name's Matthew Henderson. I thought it was a local guy because there used to be a Matthew Henderson that worked at one of the local news channels. It was not him. But and then I read that article. I was like, okay, this makes a lot more sense. And so at first I'm like, okay, this kind of sucks. Like he's probably spending no time on actual Wichita Life stuff or Wichita stuff. But then part of me is also like, he's also kind of doing some of my job for me. So I just kind of grabbed some of the links and I know a couple of the stories. A lot of stuff he covers is stuff that I'm never going to cover. I don't cover crime. I don't cover politics. He covers all that stuff because he's just grabbing links off of wherever. But I'm not going to touch that. So he's not really competition. Um, there was another one. I started seeing Facebook ads, and he might be listening to this. I don't even know what his name is, but the Facebook ad was one of those like tweets that like people. Sorry, that's my text. You might not even, or is one of those tweets that is like whatever. If you live in this town, blah blah blah. Anyways, it's the format that like everybody on Twitter uses for those local newsletters. Um, Part of me was like, is he in this newsletter club group? Because like people had just thrown that around in the group. And then I saw there's a guy on Twitter replying to like Tyler Dank and replying to Michael Kaufman. So I went and clicked on his profile and just followed it. It's like a random, completely unrelated. It's not a person. It's like this other account. So I followed him just because I thought it was interesting. They were asking about Facebook ads. Anyways, the guy DMs me and he's like, hey, you and then this other guy in town were like big inspirations for what I'm trying to start. And so it was just funny. Like, again, is it competition? Maybe, but like we're way bigger right now. Like he might have an angle that's way better, but like it is what it is. So like there's not much we can do about it. Honestly, I view like the legacy media as more of a competition at this point. We've gotten into some interesting conversations with them and from them. They kind of take shots. Like I consider it punching down at this point. They're trying to punch down at us. With like editorials in the paper and like just different stuff. We have a deal with the city of Wichita. And so they view that as like a negative, the legacy media does. And then they try to turn everyone against us, but like us being me and my other blogger friend. But it's just been funny. Like when we post about this, everybody has our back. I'm like, if they want to start a war, let's start a war. But I view that as more of competition, like the old guard versus the new guard versus like again, I speak to about my buddy Eddie. He has a newsletter too, and he texts me asking me questions because he knows I've done it for longer. Like, but he has a different angle. Like he does a lot more about food, and I do a lot more about this other stuff. So I think honestly, I think a big thing in Wichita that we try to preach and other people preach is like collaboration over competition. Like there's enough room. There's 650,000 people in Wichita. I've only got 25,000. I've got a little tiny bucket. Like hopefully I have half of that at some point in the future, but like it's going to be a while. So I think there's enough love to go around.
Yeah, no, totally. That makes a lot of sense, and especially on the monetization side, right? That a lot of the business owners, they see the legacy media as where to put their ad dollars, right? Because that's just what they're
Right.
used to. So in
Yep.
that sense, they definitely are the competition. Um,
Absolutely.
cool. Okay, and then lastly, what are your plans? Yeah, speaking of the future, like what are your goals with Wichita Life? Like, how do you see this going? What are you going to do to get there? What are you
Yeah,
thinking future wise?
for sure. I think if you had asked me 2 years ago, I'd be doing Wichita Life full time right now. But we moved and got rid of our 3% interest mortgage
Yeah.
rate
No.
last summer, and so but we moved out. Our kids are starting school, and so we wanted to be back out in kind of this certain school district. But I would say uh, in 5 years, I hope Wichita Life is 5 times bigger. I would say I'm still probably editing at that point, but I'm not writing a lot of this. We have people helping us with social media, a small team. I don't really want a big team, but I think a small team is appropriate. But with that, doing spin-off businesses. I know some people are like spinning off businesses right away, and I have ideas for smaller ones. But a lot of that's just like, man, I don't want to create a bunch more work for myself. Like I would love for this to be like a great lifestyle business that's making 500,000 a year. We can go on vacations when we want. I can be with the kids whenever I want because I have a flexible schedule. I think that sounds way better than buying 5 businesses and then being swamped having to deal with managing all these people. But again, if I were to start a business or buy a business, which again, that would be awesome. Like there's nothing better than owning that business and then just promoting it in your own media company. Um, but I would make sure to have an operator in place that can run that. And
Of
whether
course.
that's give them an equity split so there's actual like the incentives are aligned. But I would say probably a daily newsletter at that point, hopefully doing the podcast more often. Social media is a lot bigger. Just continue to grow and start to kind of spin off some fun stuff. So
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And then was there anything that I didn't ask you that you think people might want to learn about your journey or your wins, your losses, anything you think would be valuable for people that I didn't ask?
I think you covered most of it. Something that did come to mind, we have kind of a very small like supporter program. So like a Patreon model, like
Okay.
we've done like I think it's like $10 a month or $100 a year, that type of deal. And we have some people like dozens, not hundreds or anything like that. I would say there's something there. Early on, we tried like, okay, do you guys want to do meetups? Do you want to do this or that? And it's just like the people that do that are just wanting to support for the most part. Like they're just
Mhm.
willing to support whether they're my friends, like family, whoever that is. I would say don't be afraid to like pitch that more often. I think I am often too afraid to do that. But it'd be nice to have like kind of a higher baseline of just that recurring model or recurring giving. So I would say look into that. I think somebody that's doing that really well is Andrew with the Huntsville Explorer. I think it is. He does really well. He's smaller than us, and he's got way more people doing that. But
Really?
he does it well with like giveaways in the newsletter. Like you have to be a member of this group, and you could win tickets to this stuff. Like I get free tickets all the time,
Oh, I
and so
see.
I'm going to start doing that. And like he very subtly plugs it like in the intro or near the top, and that just creates a flywheel every month of more people signing up. And so that's something I will be implementing soon, and hopefully that can start to take over a bigger chunk of the pie of revenue.
That's actually a great idea. I've never heard that.
Yeah,
So
he's the
you're
only person I know that's doing it that well. And I'm like,
yeah,
dude, you're blowing me away. I need to do this.
because if you us the local newsletter operator can get a lot of free tickets, free gift cards, free whatever, and you want to give them out, and you're giving them out at a high rate relatively, people can pay to be your supporters, and then they have a
Right.
chance to win that stuff. So in a way, it's like paying them back.
Right,
I
exactly. And it's like
mean,
I don't
yeah,
want to do like I don't want to put stuff behind a paywall. But if you're wanting to like support us, that's great. But I need to give you enough incentive to do that. And
yeah,
so I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that's an easy one because a lot of people like a lot of event promoters like we're starting to get to the point where like okay, Disney on Ice is up on the billboard and all the billboards and on TV and whatever else digital ads.
Mhm,
We're finally getting to a point where like they kind of respect us enough to like pay us
mhm,
rather than just like hey, do you want to do a giveaway to your social media in exchange for tickets?
mhm,
Now we're kind of like, can you give us $500 too? Like,
mhm.
you know what I mean? But there's a lot of events we can't go to or don't want to go to. So we have a ton of tickets, like
Yeah.
to random events and if we don't have them now, it's like I could easily get them. So it's
Mhm.
like I can use that then once a month to incentivize and reward those supporters for wanting to support us.
Yeah, man. I hope you start that soon. You got to give me an
Yeah.
update on how that
Yeah. For
goes.
sure.
That sounds really cool. Awesome, man. Well, hey, this has been great, Landon. Really appreciate you coming on and chatting. And that was some really good advice and ideas for people. I mean, you're one of the rock stars doing this. I mean, I don't know
Thank
how
you.
many people have over 20,000. I mean,
Yeah,
there's a few, and
I
you're one of them.
appreciate that. Thank you.
So that's
Yeah, thanks
awesome.
for having me on. I'm excited to see kind of what this podcast becomes. I think
Yeah.
there's few and far between. I think there's some podcasts that cover, like I know Jas and Ryan and some of those guys have been on some of these other podcasts. And like
Mhm.
I love listening to those. So it's cool to have like a dedicated one
That's
of those. So
that's my goal. I found the same thing. I'm like, there's great stuff, but it's all on random like side hustle channels. And
yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
okay, let's just make one where you're talking about this. So
yeah, for sure.
that's
I
my plan.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Landon. See you,
Yeah, talk to
everybody.
you. Yeah.
Bye.